this morning. I was going to be able to be here until stay up to the first service. And because we had deer, just in the meantime, one of my grandchildren was soccer tournament. And everybody else is tied up, so Poppy and I pick him up and take him to the soccer match.
Oh, thank God.
So all that will be left is just help me part of the program.
Okay, that I can handle.
Sure.
Got it.
You doing okay?
Yeah?
Can I call you?
No.
I told her we spoke and she let you go.
Oh, I love her so.
Yeah, so she'll be in touch. She didn't hear what she's doing. Your service. The people say that was a light in the service.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's all we need for the very end. We sit through the whole service first. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Candor.
Do you want me to do a Sir Shalom at the end of the Amida? We're not gonna go to Shalom.
No, we just
Yeah.
do, I'll have to do this. Sure.
Yeah. You just want to go straight to Kaddish Shalom for that?
For Shabbat or for Musa?
From this end. Shopper. You want me to do it for the
Well, yeah, after you do the door, there's no rotation of this, just the umbrella. We continue your comment down for your page, 191 or 192, and then you're done, you're around, and you just go.
yeah, and I'm totally willing to do the dope this time, right? The Finkelstein, the dope.
Yeah, I don't think there's a rule of
Oh, no, okay, yeah, because I'm just thinking about this.
Yeah, but makes it because they have to make sure the kid knows.
Oh, yes.
They basically know one way to do it, and you have to do it that way.
Yeah.
The nice thing about these kinds of Shabbat isn't really a thing like you
Do
power.
whatever you want. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Shabbat shoe, but no one's.
So you know, how many times do you
No honor. Yeah, but we don't want to really minimize it. Just people who are up here. Can you talk about? He's a multi-talented cantorial student. And you be stronger.
Well, plus I've had some training since I've had 8 years of training. No,
And you notice
more like 6 years of
it
training.
is in your chapel. So it's all for all you. Wait, let's see your chapel. It is out.
Yes, I tried 8 years of
It's out.
Yeah.
It's out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just call. It's once in a while. I hope someone's doing it. I mean, like, it's not my specialty. I can do it. Is it going to be pretty?
I mentioned to you after the holidays.
I can do it in Torah trope. All right, we have like 1 minute. I assume it's going to start automatically broadcast. Yeah, it's going to start automatically just stream.
I don't know. Phil's not really.
Apparently not. And I don't think I would know what to do on there even if I had.
I know a little bit about the mics, but that's not the stream.
No.
But I'm sure he's got it set there.
I'm sure it's set to go least I hope so.
Oh, well, I guess in a minute. How are you doing? Pretty cool today.
It is, yes.
Okay, good to see you.
I don't think you get booted to the end if there's just two of us. I think you, you know, I think we all get promoted. No. You can. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shalom. Got folks here, folks hopefully up there. Welcome to Shabbat Shuvah. It's a very special, very important, and often not a hugely attended Shabbat because everyone's, it's between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and everyone's feeling very shulled out. But you're the few, the proud, the people who go to shul on Shabbat Shuvah. Shabbat Shuvah is notable because, first of all, there are some changes in our prayers, and they're usually demarcated, so you'll know. And it's this weird liminal time between the new year turning over and the Day of Atonement, this day where we spend the whole time, we're not eating, we're not drinking, we're not worrying about what our clothes look like, we're not working, it's just a day to live inside of ourselves. So we're in this weird time right now, even today, where we're between these two poles. And Judaism teaches that in these liminal spaces between these two huge times, it's a weird space. Crazy things happen in the liminal spaces. You could be anything, you could do anything, you can think all sorts of thoughts, and who knows how the things that you're thinking now, the resolutions you're setting, the intentions you're setting for the year, who knows how far that will take you and what kind of effect it'll have on your life. So hopefully you've got some good thoughts going on, Shabbat Shuvah, and during the entire Yamim Noraim. We will begin with Shochenad, page 147, led by our cantorial student, Neil Teibel.
שוכנד מרום וקדוש שמו וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני לישרים נאווה תהילה בפי שרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובמקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל ולחלץ על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אל חיי העולמים.
If you're not already standing, please rise. Middle of page 148 for the Chetzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
וילמד יברח ירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחיי חון וביום מחון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל. בעגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. בעגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ועול מעלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילא לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן ויאמרו אמן ויאמרו אמן ויאמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
You may be seated.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. אין כרך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא. אפס בלתך גואלנו לימות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים.
Turn to page 151, El Adon.
אל אדוני כל המעשים, ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה, גודלו וטובו מלא עולם, דת ותבונה סובבים אותו, המתגאה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה, זכות ומשול לפני כיסאו, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו, טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו, יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם, להיות מושלים בקרב תבל, מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה, נאה זיום בכל העולם, שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים במה רצון קונם, פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו, סודה ורינה לזכר מלכותו, קרא לשמש ויזרח אור, רב והקים צורת הלבנה, שבח נותנים לו, כל צבא מרום, תפארת וגדולה, שרפים ויופנים, וחיות הקודש. תברך משינו שבח מעשה ידיך ועמוד היור שעשית יפרוך הסלע.
Continue page 153.
תברך שרים מלכים גולים וברי קדושים. כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בהמה וביראה רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה וזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים, ומפארים ומעריצים, ומקדישים וממליכים את שמם. כולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ורונה ונעימה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו, ואופנים וחיות הקודש בראש גדול מנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ברוך אמותיתנו מלך אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו ברע לאורו, ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
Page 154.
והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות ליוצאנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני אבוכה במו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושינתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
We continue silently with the paragraphs on page 156.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר על בני ישראל ואדמת עליהם ויעשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונטלו על ציצית הכנף וציל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. דור ודור קיים ושמו קיים וכריסטו נכון ומלכותו אמונתו לעד קיימת וחיים קיימים. אמת שאתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו ואמותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו ואמותינו יוצרנו צור ישועתנו פורדנו ומצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך עזרת אבותינו ואמותינו אתה ומעולם. תפילות לעליון ברוך ומבורך משה ומרים ובני ישראל הכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Please rise.
צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי חינומך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, קהל ישראל.
We turn to page 159 for the Shabbat morning Amidah, which will begin all together, being mindful, of course, of the additions for Shabbat Shuvah.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, כומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכה חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, מלך עוזר לפקנו משיח ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופקד שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, וחיי מתים אתה רוב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו אישני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומדומך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ורחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב היה נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנשאים לעומת צלפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. במקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך את ציון, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים, ירושלים עירך לדור ודור, לדור ודור ולנצח. לנצח ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. על ידי דוד, על ידי דוד, על ידי דוד, משיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגה לך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגה לך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ושכחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך. כי על מלך גדול, כי על מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה, אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
We continue with our silent Amidah through page 166, again being mindful of the substitutions for Shabbat Shuvah. Of course, continue your Amidah if you are still davening that. If it is your custom, you may be seated for the Kaddish Shalem, page 167.
יגדל ויגדש שמי רבה,
אמן.
ועמדי וחירותי, והמליך מלכותי, וחייכון ומכון חיי לכל בית ישראל, והגלה בזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ועולם ועלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח יפאר ויתמה וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקודשה בריחו, לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, ושכתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. תגבל סרטון ואלטון דכל ישראל, כל דם עוון לישמעיה, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה משמעיה, וחיים עליה ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום ברומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen.
We've now come to the part of the service where we begin the process of taking the Torah out of the ark. We turn to page 168 for Ein Kamocha.
אין כמוך ואלוהים אדוני, ואין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אהבה רחמים הציבה ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך אלרם ונישא אדון עולמי.
We rise as the ark is opened.
ויהי בצהרון ויאמר משה קומה אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ולבד אדוני מירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. ביאנר החץ ולשמי קדישה קדישה יקירה אנא אמרתו שלחן ביאנר החץ ביאנר החץ ולשמי קדישה קדישה יקירה אנא אמרתו שלחן יהי רבה קדמך תפתח ליבי ויורייתא ותשלים משאלין דליבי וליבה לכל עמך ישראל לטוב ולחיים ולשלום אמן. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlul Adonai iti, Neromema Shemo yachtav. Lecha Adonai Agedula ve'agevura ve'atiferet ve'anetzach ve'aod. Ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. Lecha Adonai hamamlacha ve'amin naseh lechol erosh romemu.
Romemu,
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 Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachavu, ve'ishtachavu, ve'adom ragav kadosh hu. Romemu,
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 Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachavu, ve'ishtachavu, ve'har kadsho, ki kadosh, Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
You may be seated. We are in our Chumash and Parshat Ha'azinu, which is such a singularly. I'm so glad you're here, physically or virtually, to hear this particular parsha. It is a very unusual one, not just because it's the second to last, and for all intents and purposes, it is the last one most of us will ever hear because it's the last one we read on a Shabbat morning. Parshat Ha'azinu is mostly a poem, which also makes it rather interesting. And it's not like a happy-go-lucky kind of poem. If you actually look through the words, I mean, there is positive stuff in there, but it also kind of it's sad because Moses knows, this is his swan song really, that things are not going to go well for the Israelites when he leaves them finally. And he knows that we Jews are going to stray and we're going to make mistakes. So very fitting for high holidays. But it does have an optimistic note in it too. It's a complicated poem. I love it. Ha'azinu you will find on page 1185 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. Otherwise, you are just in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 1.
ויעזור, ויקים ישיר לכל גזים בו ונאמר רמי נקול וגלגלנו נקודרה יעמוד ראשון ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו ידעתם עד ביקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים לכם היום.
Page 1185, verses 1 through 6. Our reader is J. Smith, member of the Beth Assured Yacht Squad.
Baruch Hu Adonai HaBorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'char banu k'elohim nasalon astroso. Baruch Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. Hazinu hashamayim ve'adabera ve'tishma haaretz imre fi yarov kamatar lichi tizal katal imrati kis irim ale deshe ve'chirvivim ale esev ki shem Adonai ekra Havu Godel Eloheinu Hatzur Tamim Paolo Ki Chol Derachav Mishpat El Emunach Ve'en Avel Tzadik Ve'yashar Hu Shichet lo banav mumam, dor ikesh uftalto, hal Adonai tigmelu zod, am naval velo hacham. Halhu avicha kanecha, hu asecha vaychonanecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah v'chayotah b'sochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
For the second layer, we're on page 1186, verses 7 through 12. The reader is another member of the Beth Yeshurun Yad Squad, Michael Richker.
Baruch Adonai Olam Va'ed.
Amen. Zachor, Yemot Olam binu shonot dor vador sha'al avicha v'yadgecha zechenecha v'yamrulach b'hanchel el yanko yehim b'harfrido b'nei Adam yatzei kivulot amen lemizpar b'nei Yisrael ki chelek Adonai amo Yaakov chevel nachalato yimsa'ehu be'eretz midbar uftohu yilel yeshimon yisovavenu yavonanehu Yitzrenhu ka'ishon eino kanesher ya'ir kino al gozolaf yirachev yifroz kanafach yikachehu yisa'ehu al evrato Adonai badad yakenu ve'en imo el b'neichar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam natav v'zochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
For the third layer, we're on page 1187, verses 13 through 18.
Baruch Yes.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bocher banu mikol ha'amim v'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yarkifehu al bamate aretz vayachal tenuvot sadai vayeni kehu davash misela v'shemen milcha mitzur. Chamat bakar v'kalev sahon im kelev karim v'elem b'nei v'shan v'atudim im kelev kilyot chitaha v'dam einav tishtechamer v'yishman yisharun v'yivat shamata afita kasita v'yitosh Eloha asahu v'nabel el tzur Yeshuato Yatni'u b'zarim b'toevot yachisuhu yisbachuhu Lashedim lo Eloha Elohim lo yada'um chadashim mikarov bahu lo sa'arum avotechem sur yulatacha teshi vatishkach el makol alecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natav v'elokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We pause for a moment during our Torah reading to do a Misha Barak for the Cholim, a prayer for those who are in need of healing at this time, whether that's healing in their body, in their mind, in their soul, their spirit. I think a lot of people need healing right now. So if you know anyone in your life, anyone Jewish or not Jewish, God actually loves everybody, who's in need of some healing. And I'm going to say there our list, but when I pause after our list, and if you're in this room right now and you'd like, I'll pass my hand around. You can say their name out loud. If you'd like, you can say their name in your heart. If you're at home, you can say it out loud. Say it in your heart. God hears them either way. Sal Semi Shaberach Avoteno Rahami Takbi Yaakov Sararicha Rachel Yavrech Repe et Cholim Avagail Bat Fredel Avraham Baruch Ben Yoel Bela Rivka Bat Suralea Chayalea Bat Malia Rachel Hanun Ruvain Ben Rachelea Davida Ariela Bat Shifra Bechaim Mordechai Devorah Rachel Bat Chana Sarah Vazalman Ber Elia Laban Fe Esther Lis Bat Sarah Leah Bat Elanor, Lev Ben Gershon, Misha Chaya Bat Chana Edka, Moshe Pesach Ben Fegla, Mordechai Ben Simcha, Moshe Aaron Ben Yaakov, Natan Ben Leah, Neleor Agarson Bat Kohana Avraham, Pinchas Hirsch Ben Miriam, Rachel Bat Avraham Vesara, Rachel Bat Batya, Rachel Yafa Bat Avraham Vesara, Rav Pinchas Ben Etarut, Shabtai Ben Keila, Shai Ber Ben Chaim Samson, Shmuel ben Perla, Shulamit Yaakova, Bat Fruma, Simcha, Michal, Yosef, Yaakov ben Bela, Rivka, C. Ryan Anderson, Shelley Arsham, Bertha Berdichevsky, Asher Berman, Andy Bernstein, Brad Borden, Lillian Elise Buza, Linda Katz Brandt, Max Breyer, Lynn Butcher, Celine Chasin, Meyer Chaskin, Tracy Chaskin, Michelle Weiss-Cohen, David Kottner, Deborah Danforth, Marla Davidoff, Alexander Dillingham, Sue Delaney, Nancy Zingle, Jeffrey Feinstein, Betty Friedman, Barbara Goldmar, Joe Gittleman, Ruben Grinstein, David Gurin, Frida Harris, Suzanne Harrison, Sheila Harlow, Virginia Ginny Hattenbach, Chase Hessen, and Jim Loretta and Denise Myers, Patty Hickman, Alexander Hoffman, Oscar Hoffman, Paul Hoffman, Simon Hoffman, Jerry Hooks, Orlando Jimenez, Marnie Berkowitz Kaner, Michael Kirkpatrick, Donna Lapsey, Max Lapsey, Olga Lara, Carl Lenz, Mary Leone, Barbara Lindenberg, Herman Litt, Jordan Mothersbach and Mike Jr., Rachel Nino, Mike Perlitz, Isidore Reitchick, Dean Rosenberg, Deanne Rosenberg, Bernadine Rosenblatt, Rita Sue Rosenfeld, Rose Rosenthal, Marion Sheps, Jeremiah Scott, Bruce Sayre, Scott Selzer, Alan Shapiro, Jerry Shynock, Diane Shapiro, Richard Shapiro, Jeffrey Simon, Roger Sofer, Lucy Susie, Guillermo Vasquez, Jerry Wasserstein, Lily Weinbach, Esther Weinstein, Mary Wolf, George Mike Zaskin, Aaron Kirhati, Bela Batschritzer Pearl, Bill Turner, Billy Layden, Chaim Laser, Ben Teba, China Bat Tzvi, Danielle Ben Shulamit, Don Kobos, George Noon, Gerrit Hohendorf, Herschel Chaim Ben Chana, Israel Ben Gittel, James Whitehead, Janil Kaiser, Bill Gregory, Pumai T. Palm, Rex Marco, Sarah Bat Yehudit, Sarah Gittel, Bat Freda, Shana Liba, Bat Esther, Shana Chana, Bat Tova Rose, Shmuel Zavel, Halevi Ben Razel, Yosef Ben Mala. Chaim Ben Sivia. Miriam Bat Chana. Roger Sofer. Gary Ben Brook. Rosenberg. Jack Shapiro. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Becca, Rachel, and Leah, bring blessing and healing to all in our congregational family who are in need of healing at this time. Bring an end to any kind of pain they may be in, any kind of suffering they may be having. Bring strength and wisdom to their caregivers' hands, their doctors, their nurses, everyone who takes care of them, because when they know what they're doing, the ones we love feel better, faster. Bring strength to all of us, God, because when we feel stronger in your love, the ones we love feel better, faster as well. And may we all have the blessings that all of God's children receive, and let us all say, Amen. You may be seated.
For the fourth Lear, we're on page 1189, verses 19 through 28.
Amen. Vayar Adonai vayinas because panav uvnotav vayomer as tirafanai mehem ma'acharitam kidor tatpuchot hema vaneim lo emun bam hem kinui bala El, ki asuni bahaflehem, ba'ani, atni ain below aham, bagoy gaval, achisam, ki eish katcha va'apihi, batikad acha or taktit, vatochal eretz bivulaham, batlahate moste harim, aspeh alem ra'ot, chitza, akalebam, mesehe ra'av, Uchkumehe Rasha, Vaketef Mariri, Vishen Mahemot, Ashalak Baham, Im Hamat Zokale Afar, Michut, Tashakil Cherev, Umechad Arim, Emaha, Gambachur, Gambatulaha, Yonek in Iseva, Amarti Afehem, Ashbitan Me Enos, Zichram, Lule, Kaaso Yev, Agur, Pen Yanakru, Sarimoho, Pen Yomru, Yadenu Rama, Faloho, Adonai Pa'akal Zot, Kigo, Ovad, Aisot, Hema, Va'aim Bahem, Tavuna.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yamot Chamishi.
For the fifth reading, page 1190, verses 29 through 39.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'chabonu mikol amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Luchach muyaski luzot, yavinu liachari tamecha, yerdov echadel lefushnai mani suruvava, imloch itzuram echara, baranai yiskiram, yilok itzurenu tzuram, yavenu plidim, kimigefen tzadam gafnam, mishad motam morah, anavemo in bedrosh, ashkadot marodot lamo, Chamat haninim yainam v'rosh pranim haksar alu kamusimadi chatum biyotzotai lina kam v'shilehem li'etamot raglam ki karov yamedam chashatu dod lamo yadin Adonai amo v'yalav David necham ki yeregi ozlad yahad v'yefazat sur v'azuv v'amar Eloheim tzur chasa yubo Asher chelu zvachem yochelu, yishtuyayim nesikam, yakum v'yazrachem, yilechem sitra, ruata. Ki ani hu, v'yen Elohim b'madi, ani amid v'achayem. Machatzti v'ani erpa, v'yen miyadi matzil.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emes, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Tamot shishi.
For the sixth reading, we're on page 1192, verses 40 through 43. The readers are yet another member of the Beth Yeshurun Yad Squad, Angela Smith Litvak.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Ki Yisrael shamayim yadi ve'amarti Hayanochim leolam
אם שנותי ורחר בי, ותאחז במשפט ידי. אשיב נקם לצרי, ולמשנאי אשלם. אשכיר חיצי מדם, והרבי תאכל בשר. מדם חלל ושביה, מראש פרות אויב. הרנינו גויים עמו, כי דם עבדיו יקום. ונקם ישיב לצריו, וחיבר אדמתו עמו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נתן בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yamot Shvi.
The seventh reading is on page 1193, verses 44 through 52.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai
Baruch Adonai hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayavo Moshe, Vaydaber, et kol divrei Ashira zot b'oznei ha'am, u'Moshe binun, Vayachal Moshe, V'daber, et kol dvarim ha'ilel kol Yisrael, Vayomer alehem simu levavchem, l'chol hadvarim, asher anochi meid v'chem hayam, asher tzavu mebneihem lishmor lasod, et kol divrei haTorah hazot, כי הדבר ריקו מכם כי הוא חייכם ובדבר הזה תאריכו ימים על האדמה אשר תעברים את הירדן שמה לרשתה וידבר אדוני אל משה בעצם היום הזה לאמור עלי אל ההר Avarim hazeh har nevo, asher b'eretz Moab, asher al pnei Yericho, urei et eretz Canaan, asher ani notein livnei Yisrael achuzah umud. Bahar asher atah leshama v'yasef el amecha kasher meit, Aron achicha bor ahar v'yasef el amav asher mahaltem bi. B'toch b'nei Yisrael, b'nei Merivat, Kadesh mitbartzin, al asher lo kiddushtem oti, b'toch b'nei Yisrael, ki mineged teret haaretz b'shama lo tavo, el haaretz asher ani noten, libnei Yisrael.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tachkeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
We rise for Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
אמר יברך ירוצה וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון וביומכון, וחיי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם עולמי עלמיה יתברך. יברך וישתבח ויפאר ויתמם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשיו בריחו לעילא לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן.
You may be seated.
For the Mafta reading, it's a partial repeat. We're on page 1194, verses 48 through 52.
Baruch hu Adonai hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai barach li'olam v'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher b'kavonu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato b'rachat Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe b'yetzem hayom hazeh lemor alei el har avarim hazeh har nevo asher b'yeretz Moav asher al pnei Yericho re'ed eretz Canaan asher ani noten libnei Yisrael achuzah umud Bahar asher atav l'shama v'yasef l'mecha kasher meid Aron achicha b'rahar v'yasef l'mav ahal Asher maltem bi B'toch b'nei Yisrael b'mei merivat kadesh midbartzin Al asher lo kadeshtem oti b'toch b'nei Yisrael Ki minegetir ad haaretz v'shama lo tavo el haaretz Asher ani notein livnei Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Asher natan lanu torat emet Chayei olam nata b'tochein Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah
Amen.
Yamad Amag b'yavaglel
Please rise.
V'zot Torah asher sam Moshe
Livnei b'nei Yisrael Al pi Adonai B'yad Moshe
Torah, 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 Torah. Someone help spot him. Torah, Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. And you may be seated. We turn now in our Humashim. If you're in a Humash, we're on page 1, 2, 3, 4, so that makes that kind of easy. 1234 for Shabbat Shuvah. Shabbat Shuvah is got its own special Haftarah, and it's notable for a couple of reasons. One, thematically, it really follows the time of the year we are in right now, which is Shuvah, also not the same as Tshuva, and this time of repentance, the season of repentance. We have Yom Kippur coming up very, very shortly. So you see a lot of the themes in here about repenting and turning away from bad habits and mistakes and, the not good path and trying to turn on to the good path, and that God is always forgiving of those who want to do better. It's also notable as a Haftarah because you actually are pulling from two different books, and you just don't really see that so much. Usually the Haftarah is one prophet the whole way through, and it's actually not allowed to skip around. But, exceptions can be made if you're sticking in the same kind of group of books. Again, the Haftarah for Shabbat Shuvah is a combination. You're on page 1234 if you are in the Eitz Chaim. If you are on your own, that's cool. We are reading first from Hosea and then from Joel.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav divrei emanim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amovin b'yei ha'emet v'tzedek Shuva Yisrael Adonai Elohecha Ki chashalta bavonecha Kachu imachem devarim B'shuvu el Adonai Imru elav Kol tisavon v'kach tov V'neshalma farim sfateinu Ashur Lo yoshienu Al sus lo nirkav V'lo nomar od Eloheinu l'maseh yadeinu Asher b'cha yerucham yatom Erpa meshuvatam Ohavem nedavaki Shavapi mimenu Eyech atal Yisrael yifrach Kasho shana V'yach sharashav kalvanon Yelechu yon kotav V'hi chazayit hodo V'reach lo kalvanon Yashuvu yoshvei v'tzilo Yechayu dagan v'yifrechu chagafen Zikro, Kein Lebanon, Ephraim, Maliot Latzabim, Ani Tivashudrenu, Ani Kivrosh Ranan Mimeni, Per Yechad Nimtza, Mi Chacham V'Yavein Eile Navon V'Yedaim, Ki Yesharim, Darchei Adonai, V'Tzadikim Yehelchuvam, Ufoshim Mikashluvam, Tiku Shofar B'Tzion, Kadshu Tzahom, Kiru Atzara, Isfuam, Kadshu Kahal, Kivtzu Zekenim, Isfu Olalim, V'Yonkei Shadayim, Yetzei Chatan Mechadro, V'Chala, Mechupata, Bein Ha'olam Elam Mizbeach, Yivku HaKohanim, Meshartei Adonai, V'Yomru Chusa, Adonai Alamecha, V'al Titein Nachalatcha L'Cherpalim Shalbam Goyim, Lama Yomru Vamim Ayeh Elohim, V'Ekani Adonai Li'artso V'Yachmol Alamo, V'Yan Adonai V'Yomer Li'amo, Hineni Shaleach Lachem et Adagan, V'Tirosh V'Yitzar Usvatem Oto, V'lo etein etchem od cherpa agoyim, V'ratzfoni archik me'alechem, V'hidachtiv el eretz tziyah u'shmama et panav, el hayam ha'kadmoni v'sofu el hayam ha'charon, Yalavasho, Batal, Sachanato, Kigdil, Lasod, Altiri, Adama, Gilius Machi, Kigdil Adonai, Lasod, Altiru, Bahamot Sadai, Kidoshu, Neot Midbar, Ki eitz nasafir yo, te'nava gefen, not nuchelam, v'nei tzion, gilu v'simchu, b'Adonai Elohechem, ki natan lachem, er hamoreh litzdaka, v'yored lachem, geshem, moreu malkosh, Barishon, Malu Agaranot Bar, Veishiku Hayakavim, Tirosh V'Yitzhar, Veshilamti Lachem Rashanim, Asher Achal Arbe Hayeled, Vechasil V'Agazam, Chili Agadol, Asher Shilachti Bachem, Vachatem akol v'savoa, v'hilaltem et shem Adonai Elohechem, asher asa imachem lahafli, v'lo yevoshu ami leolam, v'datem ki v'kerev Yisrael ani, v'ani Adonai Elohechem v'yenod, v'lo yevoshu ami leolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol olamim, tzadik b'chod arot, hayal hane'eman, haomer v'yosem daberim kayem, shekol v'rav emet v'tzedek, ne'eman atah hu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim dvarecha, v'daverecha mivarecha, ach v'lo yeshuv reikam, ki hamelech ne'eman v'rachaman atah, Baruch atah Adonai,
Bershmo.
hayal hane'eman chol v'adrav.
Amen.
Rachei Mal Tzion ki Beit Chayenu V'lalu ad Nefesh Toshia b'meira v'yameinu Baruch atah Adonai, Sameach Tzion bevanecha.
Amen.
Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu, B'Eliyahu Hanavi Avdecha, V'Mechuvi David Meshichecha, B'Meira Yavov, Yagel Libenu, Al Kisela Yeshiv Zar, Lo Yinchadu Acharim Et Kvadoho, Ki V'Shem Kodshcha Nishpat Lo, Shaloich B'nei Ro Le'olam Vahed, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen David.
Amen.
HaTorah V'Yolvedav Yonvim V'Yom HaShabbat Hazeh, Shenatata Lanu, Adonai Eloheinu L'Kedusha V'Limnecha L'Kavod U'Tifaret, Ala Kol, Adonai Eloheinu Anachnu Modim Lachem Rachim Otach, Yivarach Shemcha B'Fi Kol Chai, Tamid Le'olam Vaed, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Yasher Koach to Rabbi Horowitz for both reading Torah and Haftarah, and such a fun and interesting Haftarah it was at that. We will now be led in a prayer for the United States and Israel.
Eloheinu v'Elohewotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, we invoke your blessings on our country, the United States of America, its president and elected officers, and all those who exercise just and right authority. Do instruct them out of your law so that they may administer all affairs of state in justice and equity, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, right and freedom may forever abide among us. Unite all the inhabitants of our country, whatever their origin, race, or belief, into a bond of true brotherhood. Banish hatred and bigotry, and safeguard the ideals and free institutions which are our country's glory. We also invoke your blessings on the state of Israel. Do enable Israel, our eternal homeland, to withstand and outlive the hostility of its neighbors, to grow and to flourish. Enable all its inhabitants to live together in peace. May the state of Israel be at peace and be secure within its borders. May it continue to serve as a homeland for your people, a light to the nations, and a source of spiritual renewal to Jews and all peoples throughout the world. Finally, we ask your blessings upon the valiant servicemen and women of the American military forces and the Israel Defense Forces who risk their lives to protect us. Fill their hearts with faith and courage, guide them in peace, lead them toward peace, and return them speedily to their families, alive and unharmed. And let us together say,
Amen. We turn back in our Siddur to page 181 as the Cantor real student leads us in the Ashrei.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha On Yalu Chasela
Ashrei Am Shekachalo, Ashrei Am Adonai Elohim.
תהילה לדוד עממך אלוהי המלך והברכה שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל יום מברכך ולשמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני מלא מאוד ולגדולתו אין חקר.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך וגבורתך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודיך ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
וזוז נורתך יאמרו אותך ספרנה.
זכר אהבתך יביאו וצדקתך יעננו.
חנון אדוני ערך אפיים וגדל
טוב אדוני לכל וחמה וכל מעשיו.
יודוך וכל מעשיך וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו גבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורתיו וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
שמח לכל הנופלים זוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יסברו ואתה נותן לכם את הכלם בעיתו.
פותח את ידיך מסביר לכל חי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכך וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אנו לכל קורב לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
את צאן יאהב יעשה ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומר כל אוהביו ואת רשעים ישמיד.
תהילה אדוני רבי פיו ויברך כל בשר שכושו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה.
We rise, page 183.
יהללו את שם אדוני כי נשגב שמו לבדו. הודו לארץ ושמיים וירם קרן לימו. תהילה לכל חסידיו לבני ישראל עם קרובו. הללויה, 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 הללויה. במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ולכל יום כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזובו. את חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכה מאושר. דרכי נועם, בכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם.
You may be seated.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I want to begin by thanking Rabbi Strauss for the invitation he extended me today to deliver this morning's Devar Torah. The fact that I'm speaking today, or any rabbi speaking today, will come as no surprise to most of you. We expect to hear a rabbi speak when we come to the synagogue on any Shabbat morning. And in most synagogues of the world, regardless of the denomination, the rabbi traditionally, typically, will stand up at some point and deliver words of learning, of Torah, a message to take home with you. It is not so in some quarters of the Jewish world. In the very, very Orthodox, sometimes called the ultra-Orthodox, sometimes in the yeshiva world, especially in Israel, though the rabbi is permitted to speak whenever he wishes, the rabbi traditionally does not. Shabbats come, Shabbats go. No word from the rabbi. The rabbi may not even sit in front of the congregation except on those occasions when he does speak. And when does he speak? According to Jewish tradition, the rabbi is compelled to speak twice a year. On Shabbat Hagadol, the Sabbath before Pesach, and on Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. On Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat, the rabbi is compelled to speak about the laws of Passover, to remind the congregation of all the myriad details that are involved in celebrating the holiday. This is kosher, that is not. And today, on Shabbat Shuvah, to remind the congregation of something more spiritual, namely, that no matter how far we may have strayed from God or the Jewish faith in the year gone by, as we approach the holy day of Yom Kippur, Yom Hadin, the day of judgment, God will take us back and return us to himself. Shuva Yisrael ad Adonai Elohecha, we just read in the Haftarah. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God. Those are the words with which the Haftarah began. And those are the words that God himself utters, to come back, to come home, and to know that you and I will be accepted in his loving embrace. Sometimes it's hard to stay connected to our faith, especially when we are forcibly separated physically from both our place of prayer and our fellow Jews, as we have been these last many months. But even in normal years, it's not hard to lose that connection sometimes. And then suddenly we realize we haven't been in Beth Yeshurun since Rosh Hashanah a year ago. We haven't uttered a bracha over anything. And the only time we've spoken God's name has been in vain. We're still Jewish, but we don't feel it. We've lost it. Can we get it back? Can we return? On Yom Kippur, our tradition teaches that God opens his arms and says, come back. You will always have a place in my heart. Reconnect and return to your people. Shuva Yisrael, God cries out. Return to me. The line we recite at the end of every Torah service suggests we not only want to, need to, but can. What did we just sing? Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Return us to you, O God, and yes, we will return. And that's why the most ultra-Orthodox rabbi in Israel, who may never preach, does preach today, to assure each worshiper, each congregant, that like E.T., you can go home to your God and to your people. But I think that this year there's another kind of return we might seek on this Sabbath of return. This year, many of us are asking the question that was so eloquently addressed by Rabbi Strauss on Rosh Hashanah. Can we really return? Can we ever return to the Jewish world that existed before COVID-19 took it away from us? Can we once again be the community of faith that filled this congregation for so many Shabbatot and holy days and B'nai Mitzvah and weddings? Can this synagogue and synagogues everywhere once again be the centers of Jewish life they were less than a year ago? Some great scholars and rabbis say no. The world has changed too much these last several months. Jewish life as we know it will never be the same. Tens of thousands of Jews around the world will not return. Our memberships will erode and people will drift away. These sentiments were first enunciated 6 months ago when we were in the midst of our initial quarantine back in March and April. Articles appeared in the Jewish press which speculated that the pandemic would destroy the central institutions of Jewish life and wreak havoc upon our Jewish community centers, camps, schools, and most significantly, our synagogues. For the first few months of the COVID-19 outbreak, much of what these analysts wrote seemed clairvoyant. Members of our congregation told me how much they enjoyed watching everything online, sitting on their sofa in their shorts and t-shirts, noshing as they listened to the rabbi's sermon, getting up, moving around, petting the dog. It was so nice, they said. It was a pleasure. But what might have seemed prophetic 6 months ago seems to have lost its inevitability. Rabbis report now that the number of people watching online has dramatically fallen off. And not because people have lost interest, but because they feel that fortunate as we are to have online services, they simply don't feel the same. Don't ignite that spiritual spark like actually being in the pews in person. Indeed, the biggest lament most people have had throughout this pandemic is the inability to be with their friends and extended family face to face. Synagogue affiliation rates have not dramatically declined, suggesting the overwhelming number of Jews who belong to synagogues have every desire to come back, to sit next to people they know, to schmooze with their clergy and fellow Jews at the Kiddush lunch. What people are saying is a paraphrase of 3 more words we sing when the Torah scrolls are returned to the ark. Yes, we sing, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, return us to you, O God, and yes, we will return, but then we conclude with 3 more words, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, restore us, dear God, as we were before. That's what we want. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, bring us back to what we had. Shabbat Shuvah reminds us that we need to be returned not only to God, but also to the people right here who make being Jewish the beautiful blessing it is for us, not just at the high holidays, but year-round. I pray we will return, and I believe we will return. And beautiful days lie ahead for all of us here at Beth Yeshurun and in synagogues around the world. And finally, on Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath of return, we can ask an even bigger picture question. Can we ever, as human beings, return to the world that we had just 9 months ago? A world in which we shook hands and hugged and embraced one another. A world in which we felt safe, surrounded by people, working with them, holding our babies and our grandparents up close, face to face, sitting with friends and our grandparents up close, sitting with friends in bars and offices and restaurants, without masks, next to each other, close. Can that world exist again when COVID-19 is minimized or we have vaccines to protect us? Many insist that even with vaccines, even with treatments, that people will never be able to go out again as they have. I have had members tell me they will always be afraid going forward. The germs will still be there. The virus will still be there. What can they trust? Who can they trust? I read an essay in the Los Angeles Times last week that predicted we will never feel truly comfortable standing next to people, shaking their hands or giving them hugs. We will never feel comfortable having a doctor examine us in person. We will never feel at home in a crowded stadium or concert hall or sanctuary or sitting in a crowded doctor's office. But I don't accept this. As a congregational rabbi for the last 4 decades, I have lived through many crises. I remember all the news stories just 3 years ago about how Houston will never fully recover from Hurricane Harvey. I remember the prognosticators who insisted during the Great Recession of 2008 that Jewish life in America would never be the same. In both instances, we did recover and even flourish. It didn't happen overnight, but it also did not take forever. We may think that because we're dealing with the virus, it's different, and it's true that every disaster is unique. But I have lived through too many prophecies of doom to truly believe we will not get through this. I'm confident that we will emerge both as a nation and as a Jewish community, impacted to be sure by what has happened, but ready to embrace the world and once again hold each other close. And the reason is because we are human beings. And part of what makes us human is that we need to be with people and to hold and touch one another, to be next to one another. And that cannot be eradicated from the DNA of who we are and how we as human beings have to live. Many years ago, when I was a student at the University of Texas, I took a class in psychology. And my professor wrote a book, one of the few textbooks from my college days that I have kept to this very day. It was called The Social Animal. And in the book, he describes what is it that makes us human. And what I have said summarizes his book. We are made a certain way. We are made to touch and to hug and to hold. There is nothing that will forever keep us from re-embracing the people we love. I'm going to share with you something that I was embarrassed happened, but it happened. Right in our Barg sanctuary on Rosh Hashanah, when we had the final blowing of the shofar, and our 3 shofar blowers were standing at the Torah ark. They were coming off the ark. I was coming off the bimah. We passed each other. One of them stretched out his hand, and I took it. The minute I took his hand, I thought to myself, please, God, this didn't get on camera. Please, God, this isn't being broadcast all over Houston and wherever. Rabbi Rosen is, he's either lost it, or he's oblivious, or he's careless. I'll tell you what Rabbi Rosen was and what our shofar blower was. At that moment, we were human. We were human. He was happy. I was happy. We both felt exhilarated by the blowing of the shofar, and impulsively, we took each other's hands. I'm not recommending everyone go out now and shake each other's hands. We have the sanitizing fluid right up there on the bimah. But you know what it reminded me? I'm not going to have to remember how to shake hands. I'm not going to have to remember that I shake hands. When the time comes, I'm going to be shaking and hugging and holding and kissing my grandchildren and my family and many of you, because that's what makes us human. Are we going to reach that day? I believe we will. And it's not that far off. And it's going to happen because we are using everything in our power to create the medical conditions that will make us able to feel more at home and safe in our skins and in our world. I am confident that we are going to return to our synagogues, and we're going to return to the world, and we're going to return to God as soon as we can, because that's how we were made to be. We as a people have made our own futures many times. We have risen from despair and destruction to reach new heights over and over again. And I firmly believe that our nation and our Jewish people and our world will survive the coronavirus. And on this Shabbat of return, I not only pray for that return, I predict it. Back to God, with whom our relationship transcends time and space. Back to our synagogues, because our tradition teaches Jewish life can only be celebrated with other people. And we cannot exist as Jews without one another. And back into the world, because we cannot and will not live any other way, because that's what our DNA compels us to do. When new treatments drop the mortality rate of COVID-19, as they already are beginning to do, when a vaccine decreases the likelihood of ever contracting the disease, or at least lowering the risk of it, I have faith we will return to the fullness of life for which we also yearn. So let us be optimistic and let us be hopeful. Let us be prepared to embrace it when that day comes, for I am positive it will. This year, as every year, we will end Yom Kippur with the Tekiyah Gedolah of the shofar, and we will sing out and shout, L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. To which this year I will add, next year in Jerusalem, and next year together, all of us in our shul, next year together with our families arm in arm, or as the popular song has it, Od tirei kama tov yihiyeh. Just you wait and see, just you see what a world it will be next year. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach to Rabbi Rosen for a wonderful Devar Torah. It's so much optimism and hope and compassion, too. It's beautiful. What a wonderful Shabbat Shuvah sermon. We turn back into our Siddur. We turn to page 184 and rise for the Chatzi Kaddish before the Amidah.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביום מכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. בגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ועולמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודש הבריחו לעילא לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן ועלמה ויאמרו אמן ויאמרו אמן ויאמרו אמן ויאמרו אמן.
Amen. We turn to page 185 for the Musaf Amidah. For Shabbat, we begin all together.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה זוכרנו לחיים מלך חפץ בחיים וחותמנו בספר החיים למענך אלוהים חיים מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב ליושיע מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו ישרי עבר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדום אלוך מלך ממית ומחיי ומצמיח ישועה מי כמוך אב הרחמים זוכן יצוריו לחיים ברחמים ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים נריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שרתי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב היה נביאך וקרא זה על זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים שואלים זה לזה Aye, mekom kevodo, leumatam, baruch yomeiru, baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. Mimkomo hu yifen lerachamim, ויחונם המייחדים שמו, ויחונם המייחדים שמו, ערב ובוקר וכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה שמה אומרים, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, הוא אלוהינו אבינו, הוא מלכנו מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו, שנית לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אנוכי אדוני אלוהיכם, דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור הללויה, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי על מלך גדול, כי על מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש אתה, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש,
Continue with our Amidah through page 192, being mindful of the additions and substitutions for Shabbat Shuvah. Feel free to continue your Amidah. If it is your custom, you may be seated for the Kaddish Shalem, page 203.
יגדל ויגדל שמי רבה, ואמרי בחירותי, והמליך מלכותי, בחיי חון ומכון חיי לכל בית ישראל, והגדל בזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמיה יתברך. יברך וישתבח יבר וידמה וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקודש בריחו. לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושחתה ונחמתה, דמירן ועלמה, ואמרו אמן. תקבל סרטון ואותון לכל ישראל, קודם אבוני ושמיה, ואמרו אמן. יש לומר רבה משמיה, וחיים עליה כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה Shalom, Amen. All Israel, all Yeshvei Tevel, ve'yimeru. Amen.
Page 204, Ein Keloheinu.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michmoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shitiru Avotenu, Levanecha Eketoret Hasamim.
We rise as the ark is opened for Aleinu, page 205.
עלינו לשבח אדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליותר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס סולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו echad.
You may be seated. Those who are observing a yard site, or if you are in mourning, I invite you to join me on page 207 and to rise for the Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach yirotei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayei chon u'vyomei chon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mivarach le'olam almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. Vitadar, vitale, vitalal, shmei kudesha, brechu, le'ela, min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, ta'amiram be'alma v'imru, amen, yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. You may be seated. Few announcements. Some stuff happening this time of the year, you got to figure. Tonight, you can expect to receive an email with links to all of the various services that we have, both for preschool, grade school, teen, and of course, links to all of the services that will be streamed live tomorrow night and Monday, because Yom Kippur is almost upon us. And if Yom Kippur is almost upon us, that means that it is also almost time for Sukkot. Traditionally, as soon as Yom Kippur ends, you're supposed to start building your sukkah that night. Like you go home after Ne'ilah and you're exhausted and you're hungry, and you're supposed to start, at least one nail in the sukkah. So maybe keep that in mind. We can't have our traditional congregational dinners and stuff here in our sukkah, which is so unfortunate. But we have come up with some rather creative solutions. For one, we will be opening up our sukkah for you to have a meal in it with your family, and thus fulfill the mitzvah of being in the Leishev Basukkah, being in the sukkah. And so you bring your family and a dairy dinner, and we will provide the drinks, the desserts, and even crafts for the littles. Space is obviously going to be very limited, so registration is absolutely required on our website. That's all during Sukkot. Simchat Torah, we have a fun tailgate we're planning out in the parking lot. It's going to be really fun. Also, you have to pre-register to be a part of that. I'm excited. We've expanded our virtual office hours. It'll be Tuesday through Thursday, 11 to 2. And we're also available by phone and on Zoom to answer any of your questions. If you need to talk to our staff, if you're having some questions about programs and registering, or you want to access your account, anything you want to talk to our staff about, join them for our virtual office hours. And of course, please continue to join us virtually or participate if you are registered here even. We have Show and Tell next Friday. It's back with Rabbi Morgan to show us how he builds the sukkah at his home. And there will also be an opportunity for Q&A for the hows and the whys to do with Sukkot. An update for Reynolds Elementary. Huge thank you to everybody who did the Amazon wish list for that school. We are about 70% of the way there, which is remarkable. So if you would like to help out, go to the front page of our website. You can read more about our partnership with Reynolds Elementary School and purchase school supplies or donate to them directly. And also very exciting, if you're thinking about what's the Jewish stuff you have in your own home, you're like, oh, I really need to re-up some of my Judaica, or I'm in search of some books or something, a gift. Our Sisterhood gift shop is available by appointment, so please call the main Beth Yeshurun number, 713-666-1881, and or email giftshop@bethYeshurun.org, and someone will be very happy to help you. I also want to give a huge yasher koach to everybody who helped make this service possible. It's a very important Shabbat Shuvah. We have, of course, the amazing Rabbi Danny Horowitz, who read Torah, and Haftarah. We had our Samir Yad Squad, the married couple from the Yad Squad, so that's always very exciting. So thank you to Jay and Angela for reading, as well as to Michael Richker for reading Torah so beautifully. And a yasher koach, of course, to Rabbi Rosen for an inspiring sermon about Shuvah, about Tshuva, about Shabbat Shuvah, and hope for the future, which is probably the best part. And of course, a huge yasher koach. I say cantorial student. He won't let me call him Cantor. He's your kid, your grandkid. He won't let me call him Cantor because he's not a Cantor yet, technically. Hard to believe. So a huge yasher koach and a thank you to Cantor, real student, Neil Tybel, for doing a wonderful job. As always, it is always a pleasure to stand up here next to you on the bima. It's weird when you're not here. I'm so used to him being here and leading next to him. It's always a pleasure. And of course, thank you to all of you who are here today and are participating in our services online. It is so wonderful to know that I get to see half of your beautiful faces and to know that there are also folks out there on the internet right now. So it's good to see you. We will be wrapping up, which is always kind of nice, with Adon Olam, page 211, if you're interested.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעין נשא בחסו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא היה והוא אחד ושני לעם שילה להחבירה לי ראשית ולי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצור חבלי ויצרה והוא ניסי ומנוסי ונרקוסי ליום אקרא ונרקוסי ביום אקרא וידו אפקיד רוחי ויתישן וירא וימרוחי גביעתי אדוני לי ולא ירא אדוני לי ולא ירא.
Please rise for the Kiddush and the Amotzi.
Al kemerach Adonai, Yom HaShabbat v'yikadshehu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom and Gamar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed for a year of only the good stuff. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Sarah. Pleasure sharing your memory with you today. Neil, as always. No. Don't worry. I was like, where did I? I was like, who really? I'm like, nope, that's not going to.
You just let people just sing it.
Neil, when I was a rabbinical student, I had a pulpit, a student pulpit. And I stood up one Friday night, usual economics.
That's a big problem some places.
And I did the Kiddush, Friday night Kiddush, right? How many times did I do it? All my life, right? And halfway through, I didn't know where I was. I was just standing there like this. I was a big author, And I went back, and on Monday we had a deep briefing of the faculty. I was talking about the federal students. I mean, screw up. And I told him I'd lost my place, and I was embarrassed. The congregation started singing and ringing the bell. He said, "Don't ever stand up there without a prayer book. I don't care how well you know it. You should always have a prayer book in front of you." He says, "It happens. You're human, and a lesson learned."
Lesson learned.
I learned it.
Now I learned it. I have the prayer book in front of me.
Well, I know, but you weren't looking, and I mean.
Yeah, you gotta
No,
always
but you know
look
it
at
so
the
well.
prayer book. Always look at the prayer book. I'm like, I made it. I made it. No, wait, I didn't. Don't ever discount Adonai.
Too many stanzas.
Oh my goodness.
And then
Well, I mean, if you're
also,
doing I don't know exactly where you but if you do it when it's like it's hard to
I feel like most people like they wait for like they just wait for like you they wait for the person who's leading to like start and like, oh, that's what it stands as, and like they can do it. As soon as you start off with a syllable, they're like
I said
yeah, everyone's like